Hello and welcome to another episode of The Meta. I am your host, Jay Larson, and joining me for this episode is the one, the only JV. Hello,
Hey Jay,
Jacob. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Uh, I I feel like for any of the War Machine fans, you should likely not need an invitation, but we'll do it anyway. Jake, can you uh, introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Jake VanMetere. I've been playing War Machine and Hordes, now titled just War Machine, since 2006 when I picked up Legion after going to our local store. Having my other game just died out, and I've been playing Legion of Everblight and War Machine ever since 2006. It's been fun.
What was the other game that died out?
Mage Knight.
Okay, yeah, all
It
right.
was, it was a sad time. I loved that game. It was so much fun.
Have you played the Major Knight board game?
I have not tried that game yet, no.
I haven't either. I've wanted to. It's by a board game designer that I really like, and it's like I think in the top 20 highest rated board games, something in there, maybe top 10. So it's supposed to be really, really good. But
I missed that game and the three. It was a 3x3 mat. It was a free flowing game, like fixed movement. It wasn't in squares like Hero Clicks and the later games ended up being, and you could win the limited edition prizes. It was a ton of fun. I really liked it.
so Jake, you recently um, attended the WTC. You recently attended Warfare Weekend to play in the Invitational. Um, is- you played Legion at these events, obviously.
Yes.
And we'll get to some listener questions, I guess, about each of those. But I guess were there any overarching thoughts that you had from those events?
Well, first off, we have to nerf the Australians,
Fair, okay.
right? And they won three of these things. Everybody else, there's only been what 9 of these WTC events, and they've won 3 of them.
A third of them.
Yeah, seems legit, and I think it's because they're over there doing CrossFit and hanging out with some dingoes. So maybe we need to start doing that in our lives.
That might be true, yeah.
And then Warfare Weekend it was Warfare Weekend. It's always great to see everybody there.
So, I'll have a question for you on Warfare Weekend, real quick. As a reminder to everyone, we'll have this episode available to everyone for free, and then we'll have a bonus episode that you can support the Patreon and hear even more good stuff from Jacob VanMetere. So, first listener question. These are posted in the Discord and were from listeners. First one is, how did you feel about the removal of Last Chance Qualifier at Warfare Weekend?
As long with the new point-based system that they're doing, where you no longer have to win an event, and then after they determine who wins the event, and then it trickles down to like second and third place rankings, or I guess point system. The removal of the last chance qualifier is interesting to say the least. There are a lot of players in the community who cannot attend large scale conventions due to work constraints, family life obligations that are actually really good players. I know a few in my local meta that never travel that if given the chance, I think could come to the last chance qualifier, perform very well, and win, and then get into the invitational event. So I do feel kind of, I don't want to say upset, but it is a letdown to see them remove it, as it's been kind of a pinnacle since I've been going to, I guess what was War Machine Weekend is now Warfare Weekend, right? So maybe it's just a changing of the tides. But personally, I think it's detrimental. Because if you think about it too, at the same time, they're going to be running the Iron Gauntlet. So the Iron Gauntlet is supposed to be this prestigious event that you're going to try to win. But at the same time, they're going to have like a qualifier that's going to qualify you for next year's event. So why have 2 high caliber events running at the same time? It seems kind of weird to me.
Yeah, and it was frequently one of the biggest tournaments of the year. And so it's kind of sad to see that gone. And there were also a lot of people who, they didn't. I felt like it was a fairly big draw for the con because, on the one hand, most of the people who are playing in the last chance qualifier, they kind of know that they're not, likely really very likely to win the that tournament. But there's still something about you know what, I'm going to go travel to Warfare Weekend. I'm going to play in the Last Chance qualifier until I get a loss, and then I'm going to start hanging out with friends or whatever. That I think is just appealing to a lot of people. So that's a little unfortunate that it's going away. And I understand that they are changing it to do the first chance qualifier now. Um, and I guess I'm curious, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jake, but I'm assuming that you could play in the first chance qualifier, win it, and that it's not necessarily going to qualify you for next year. Is that correct?
So you're not wrong in that, yes, you only get points towards next year's qualifying to just like seat you and see where you fall. So technically, if everybody else is playing a ton of cons and there are just a ton of cons that generate points, yes, you can technically not make it in, but it's probably unlikely that if you end up winning the con that you won't make it in.
Mm. And they have, I'm previously, there was a rule, again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there was previously a rule like to qualify. Okay, so I guess I'm going to do my old man question or bit, but like back in my day, if you won an event, you qualified. But more recently, it was more so you had to place in multiple events rather than just win an event. Is that correct? And then I guess the follow up is that they've kind of gone away from that as well. It's not necessarily that you have to place in multiple events. It's just what your point total is. Is that all accurate?
That's accurate, but if I'm not mistaken, I think there was one person in the grouping last year for points that won just one event,
Oh,
and
okay.
they made it based on the points.
Okay.
But that's just because of the saturation of players, right? So you have a lot of the same players going to the same cons.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you're not like branching off and getting new people into the top eight, I guess, for points, then you're never really going to push them down.
Sure. Um, so obviously one of the big changes is that the War Machine Weekend or Warfare Weekend Invitational is dead, and it is now going to be the Iron Gauntlet. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on that transition?
I'm trying to think of how to word this very carefully,
Okay.
so I don't create giant fires everywhere. I feel that in this situation, what's happening is that maybe through some other agreement, Privateer Press, since they haven't been doing their own lock and load convention, are trying to attach themselves into this convention without maybe not having the level of cost that they were having before. So they came in, removed Warfare weekends or War Machine Weekend Invitational event, and then just put their top event, Iron Gauntlet qualifier, to be held there. Um, I personally don't like it. I think it should be separated. I liked going to Seattle to go play Iron Gauntlet at their downtown, like near their headquarters, because I thought it was a big deal, especially when it first came out in 2013. They made a big deal of it. I remember seeing on the TV, they had player profiles. They went all out, right? And that's the level of enthusiasm and dedication that we need from everybody if they're going to try to keep on pushing like a competitive atmosphere and show like they care outside of just doing these like events and doing what they're doing now. Like I miss 2013 back in my day. I mean, you remember 2013? You won it that year.
Yes, I remember that.
Everybody remembers watching that game. I watched that game. That was a ton of fun. But again, that was super hyped. Now the problem I have, right, going into MK4, going into what we're doing now, is that are they going to bring that level of hype that they did in 2013? If so, how long is it going to sustain for? Because they always bring out the A game at first, but then you notice within like a year, maybe two max, everything falls apart. And it just goes back into like a community based engagement where they're the ones keeping the game up. And it is kind of, I understand you need the community to keep the game up, but there needs to be a different level of commitment from the company for the events, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious to me, I guess, that Privateer Press was not going to, for multiple reasons, lock and load was not going to happen next year. And so then you have, I guess, either two things that could happen. You can just have the Iron Gauntlet, um, effectively cease to exist, or you can have it run at something like Warfare Weekend. And in I think in one of Matt Wilson's open letters, he said that the plan was to be spending more energy supporting community events. But I guess I'm curious, what do you like of the if your two choices are essentially Warfare Weekend takes over the Iron Gauntlet and the Warfare Weekend Invitational dies, or Warfare Weekend keeps doing the Warfare Weekend Invitational and the Iron Gauntlet dies, which one of those do you think is better, or do you think it even matters?
I would personally rather have Iron Gauntlet die over the other one because
And
up
why is
until
that?
up until this last year, I know that obviously COVID put a big wrench in everything.
Yeah,
But when's the last time you heard anything about Iron Gauntlet? It just came
right.
out of nowhere. It came back. And they're like, man, we really want to force this in again, and everybody's gonna play it. We're gonna like it. It's a big. We're gonna spend all this energy talking about it. It came out of nowhere. The point being is that it fell apart because somebody from Carpenter Press's community development or the tournament scene or however they were structuring back at headquarters decided that this wasn't important to them. And then now with the release of MK4, now they're all of a sudden trying to put this energy back and be like, hey guys, look, Iron Gauntlet's going to come back. It seems kind of, I want to say, I know it's not too little too late. I feel like it is, but obviously with the new edition, they're just trying to get a lot of hype back into the tournament scene. But again, what typically happens with any of their limited formats is that they jump into it head first, and then within 2 years, mark my word, it dies. Look at Champions, look at Iron Gauntlet. They never.
Well, I mean, yes, so on the one hand, Private Press wanted to make Champions a thing to try to fix the issues that they were having, but now, Mark IV is the thing, and I feel pretty confident that, of the two formats, the Legacy format is not going to be the popular format or the one that gets played at events. And so, it, and I mean, I guess, tell me if you agree or disagree with that, but I think that everyone's going to be playing the more limited format. And then, the Iron Gauntlet is basically just a tournament system within that format. And do you think that I'm wrong on any of that?
No, they're going to push a limited format with Prime and Legacy Prime, and they're really going to push that on people. But what's going to happen is that everybody has such an echelon of backlog models that they own, and they're going to want to use them. Like I have tons of minion models for Legion, like Wrong Eye and Snapjaw. I would like to use every once in a while in my games, right? So I'd prefer to just play unlimited all the time with everybody else because it allows more in-depth list building, and we're not as limited. So personally, I would like unlimited. And I think the second that everything opens up and we have all the rules for all the unlimited models, it's just going to go back to an open format like it currently is. Everybody's running in themes right now. I get that. I guess in Mark III. But right now, the new, I guess, little squads or the lists or the armies are very limited and seem kind of, I don't want to say out of place, but they're very limited in how you can balance out a two-list pair within the army.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people don't like that. Like I personally don't like. I'd rather just play unlimited and take my chances running into new Signar with an echelon of backlogged unlimited models. I think I'd have a better chance.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious to see what the community ends up shaking out to. I'm way more excited about the limited format than about Legacy, but in a lot of ways, it's whatever people sign up for, I guess, is going to be telling. But
the good thing is that you'll have a limited format with Legacy Prime, and then you're going to have an extended format or unlimited format, and you can gear to both players. It just comes down to, at the end of the day, after the first year or two of competitive play at conventions moving forward, how are they going to address it? Is the community going to lose interest in limited formats because they're realizing that like the new models, the new prime factions are just so strong with their limited selection of pools that the rest of the armies need a more kind of like they just need more models in the background to be able to create the lists and things like that. That's what I think is going to happen.
I don't know. I mean, that's so basically your fear or concern is that basically you wouldn't be able to keep up with the new releases with a small subset of the Legion models. Is that correct?
Correct. You
Huh.
can already see a big disparity within like new Prime factions, and I guarantee it's going to happen with new Prime Hordes factions as well. Is that the power level, in order to incentivize people to purchase it, needs to be stronger than what is currently available, or else people will not buy it. People will buy it because it looks nice, but if it's strong, which if you look at all the new stuff in the game is like insanely strong compared to old stuff. It just makes sense. So all the new stuff's going to be stronger than the old stuff. That's what they're trying to do.
I mean, I guess my assumption has been that most of the, I guess it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. But my assumption has been that that the tournament scene would be the limited format, and that most of the people would buy new factions, most likely. I'm assuming that you're not super interested in any of the new factions that they've announced so far.
I mean, I bought the battle box for Dusk just because I liked how it looked. I don't know if I'm actually gonna play it, but I like the models.
Sure. Um, I mean, I guess another in a related vein, I thought I saw a little bit about some news on the point size that Warfare Weekend was going to be hoping to have as the standard point size. Can you talk a little bit on that? Do you know much on that?
So I remember at Warfare Weekend that they were going to send out kind of a survey to have people discuss what they felt like was going to be a good point value for next year. And it came back out of the 32 players, 28 of the players indicated that they would like to do 100 points. 100 points would be, in today's game, 100 points is just around where 75 points would be, minus some free stuff and Warjack and War Peace points. Like that level.
Yeah, you're probably
like an 80
like
points.
around 50 or something. Would you say?
Something like that. But 75 points, it's a very, very small game. You don't get a lot of stuff. The games go very, very quickly. Most of my 75-point games don't go longer than 45 minutes. How they modified the game is much quicker now, which
Right.
is actually nice. I like that. The game did drag out a lot at the end of Mark III. The games were going very long, and I do enjoy the new speed of the game because that means it keeps both players interacting a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like that, but I don't like that that they basically asked us our opinion. I know they don't have to take our opinion; they're just asking us, and then they turn around and just be like, 75 points is the point value now. This is what we're going to do. They completely dismissed.
I am kind of curious how much of that is. I don't have any information on this, and so I guess that's part of my curiosity behind it. But my assumption is that it was probably Warfare Weekend that was asking what people were interested in, but that it's likely Privateer Press who is interested in pushing the 75 point level game. I don't know. I mean, I think that one of the things that Privateer Press is likely reacting to is that by the end of Mark III, there was, the games got pretty big by the time you do your list, you do all of your free models, etc. And then there was, this fan made format where people were playing really small point games that were really fast. And it feels to me like Privateer Press wants to kind of push, not the really small game, but definitely that they're more interested in having a lot more streamlined size of game that plays quite a bit faster. I mean, do you think that that's all accurate? Do you think that I'm off base on any of that?
But with how the game has adjusted, right? Taking away free cards, taking away War Beast, Warjack points.
Right.
Right. Like the game is significantly smaller.
Right.
And it just feels like the level of models you get into the game, which allows for more tactical ability on the table, more options, it's not there at 50, 75
Yeah, I
points.
mean,
The game becomes a much more complex game with options and abilities at 100. Like it's a very smooth game at 100. You're not overloading the games. The games still go pretty fast. But what it does is it opens up more to each faction, I feel like the game is just better at 100.
Sure. And I mean, it's not, I guess, too surprising that, you've obviously really loved the game and its complexity that it's had in a lot of the previous editions. And so I guess it's not surprising to me that that's what you have enjoyed more. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious how it's going to play out, what people are going to want to play, what things are going to be sanctioned, et cetera. So I guess one of the things I've noticed from previous editions of playing smaller point games is that it feels like any player who gets a really good alpha strike or a good start of the game in a smaller point game has a really significant advantage. It's a lot harder for someone to come back when you don't have as large of a list. Do you feel like that is the case with some of the smaller point levels in Mark IV, or no?
Oh, it's definitely the case. There again in the game right now.
Right.
There are some, well, not some factions. Most of the new factions that have the capability of loading out their jacks can create decently costed, very long range, high pow options in their list. Right now, I feel the game is very gun and ranged focused, and you can alpha strike stuff off the table pretty easily in the game. And whoever alpha strikes something off the table first, typically they prevail through unless they get assassinated. That's been my experience in most of my games.
Sure. And I imagine that's likely um, especially difficult with Legion, where traditionally a lot of your stuff is a little bit susceptible to getting shot off the table. So if you're playing less and are more susceptible to that, then I can see how that could be potentially a little frustrating to deal with.
That's why they gave Thagrosh Deceleration and they gave Harrier Shield Guard, because
And
the ranged power added to the game was such a large increase to range power that Legion in testing was just getting their stuff removed from the table trivially and had no chance against anything that was new.
And do you feel like the changes they've made have balanced things out a little bit better?
I still think that in hordes in general, they need to really zone in, laser focus on the war beast points and try to get them tuned in a little bit more downward, because some of the loadouts that you get on some of the customized jacks get pretty absurd between 12 and 14 points, whereas some of the beasts that we have, including some character beasts, well, I'm speaking specifically for Legion, they tend to be pretty high cost. You have Scythians at 15 points, you have Carnivian, I think he's at 16 points right now. Like Typhon's 18 points, and they completely nerfed Typhon. Less Fury, he doesn't get to shoot 3 times in his activation. He has to reload to shoot. And the problem is that 18 points, how does that compare to other things in the game? It's very high costed, and it doesn't really pull back its value too much. So I feel like they really need to focus more on the war beasts, kind of bring them down in line, because jacks right now, for their point value most of the time, hit well above their class, and war beasts can't trade into them at all, and it almost feels like it's a liability.
What's been your evolution of your thoughts or excitement level for the new edition from when you started hearing rumblings or whispers of potentially new edition to the announcement to where we are today? What's, I guess, your excitement levels and thoughts been with it?
Are you going to edit this podcast?
No.
So
you can self-censor.
So I am a playtester.
Okay.
So I've been doing playtesting since earlier this year.
Okay.
So in the initial announcement of MK4, there's a little bit of like growing pains. There's a lot of like, you go through the stages of grief. You're like, no, it can't happen. There's no way it can happen. This is crazy. We can't change the game. The game's perfect how it is. And you have to go through all the stages of grief to finally come around and be happy with the end and accept it. And at this point, like thankfully I was able to come to accept it much sooner than I thought I would. So I do like where the game's going. I like how they've
come back through and fix a lot of the core rules. They got rid of templates. I love that. Templates have been one of the most contentious issues always. Drifting AoEs, it's here. No, it's over here. It's just a pain in the ass to deal with. But some of the stuff I don't like in the game, which this is the growing page, is that how they're doing like the little like 3 warlock warcaster army sets, where it's like these 3 guys go in this like tier of the army, and then you have another branch and you can't mix them. That seems very limited for I'm not really sure what reason. And then they're so limited inside of those factions because if you build an army, you got to have an army with 2 lists from that little army block, and they're very limited, and they typically don't cover each other's bases. Like you need like somebody from that army and somebody from a different army to really like. And we don't even know what the other armies are going to be, but you need somebody else from the other side to probably cover their weaknesses. An example being like Legion has Animeg, Callus 2, and Thags 2, and like Thags 2 is like a War Beast caster, Callus 2 is kind of a War Beast caster, and then you have Animeg who's an infantry caster. But they're just like all aggression. There's like no control elements there. So it's like you take Thags as your anti-gun line because you have to, and then you take Animeg for more damage, but she's going to get shut off the table. So you take Callus, who's just more War Beast and just has threat range, but Thags is better. So it's like in Legion's little core right now, you don't really have 2 great pairs that work well together that cover everything. You just got kind of, I'm not sure. And I feel like that's the worst part of what's happening right now with the game. But everything else, for the most part, is all finally going towards a good direction.
So what would you say are the things with the new edition that you've been most excited for, and what have been the things that you've had the most trepidation?
So the things I didn't like the most, I didn't like the removal of free strikes, and I didn't like unit movement. Those are the 2 biggest things that I had to basically come around to and just be like, all right, obviously it's happening, nothing's changing, so we just got to play with it. So it adds a different just feel to the game when things are teleporting around, placing, getting behind things. It's just very wonky. It's very, even though I've played it a lot, like in my mind, every time I do it, it just feels wonky because I'm used to having to like precisely have my models in good areas in order to like get the charges off. And now it's like if one guy's in the front and I can speed him up or I can slipstream him and place him, like he threats further or farther, and then the rest of his unit also threats farther because of it. So it's just a very interesting thing to try to get your head around. And then
And do you feel like you're getting your head around on each of those?
Yeah, I feel like I've had a lot more time to play it and get my head around it, but at first it was like pretty hard to come to terms with. I felt like it was just different, and that's part of the stages of going through the grief, right? It was different. I didn't like it. I had to accept it.
Sure.
And then things I do like the removal of templates in the game. That is probably the best thing that they could have done. Now the question is, and this is the big question to everybody, is when are they actually going to give a ruling as to what the width of the spray is of your line? So those are the 2 best things so far about the new edition, is the removal of the templates. I think that's great.
All right. Well, let's go back to some more listener questions. First off, have to do a shout out to Bennett. He has always been a champ writing questions for the podcast. He is a new father and posted a picture of him with his infant with him, and so he doesn't have as many this time, but wanted to give a shout out to him and congratulate him on the exciting news. But his first questions, first off, is how to win Legion.
How to win Legion?
Yes.
In Mark 4?
Or yeah, sure.
You take Ravagors.
Okay.
They're not overly costed. They have a good ranged weapon, and AoEs in the new game are really good.
Boy, it feels like everything that was old is now new and young again.
However, the only difference is that now shepherds are much worse.
It was.
So you can no longer go up, shoot with your Ravagor, boost hit, boost damage, and then remove all the fury with the shepherd.
You probably don't even remember this, but Chain Attack used to have this long-running bit where we had recorded you saying, I would activate my Ravagor, boost to hit, boost damage, and then activate my shepherd to remove the fury. Then we would like each episode we would ask them, it was a segment of Ask Jake VanMetere, and it would be a different thing like, Jake, my roommate isn't doing his dishes. What should I do? And then he would splice in you saying that, and it was a pretty funny bit. But that's funny that Ravagors are the new hotness again.
They're good with like Anabag. They're good with Callus too. They're not really the greatest with Thags too, only because Thags are like hyper aggressive and trying to get up there and do damage. But the other two, like Ravagors, I think they're decently costed and they contribute a lot turn over turn. So I think that having one with Callus 2 and 2 in Anameg is good. But Shepherds, they need some help. If you look at a Shepherd, it's 1 point. Look at a Crix Necrotech, it's 1 point. Tell me which of those two is the winner, and tell me why it's like that. Necrotech, 5 boxes, defense 12, armor 14. They heal, they make scrap thralls. They have a better melee weapon.
I'm assuming the main reason it's that way is because you're not Circle Orboros, and so you can't have everything all the time, all at once, like they do.
So if you need to look at any faction that's relatively well balanced point wise when it comes to the beasts, it's Circle, and it's not really
wow. That's shocking to hear.
It's more of the heavies. Like if you took most of the heavies point costs and then just took that and put it into other factions, the game would be in a much better place. Like if Typhon was 16 points and not 18 points, like Getorix is 16 points, and like look at Circle Maul. Like where's Maul at point wise right now? I remember seeing him. I think he was at like 19 points at one time. Like nobody's gonna play that thing at 19 points. Like come on. But Trolls have never had it. Good. I feel for all the troll players. Like anybody who's dedicated trolls all the time, like good on you because you've gone through some shit, and maybe one day it'll pay off for you. They've had it worse than Legion for sure.
Maybe one day, once again, you'll have some broken lists like Runes of War and Kalandra, and but probably not.
But here's the crazy thing, though, with how the game has evolved over the years. If you think about the shift from Mark 2 to Mark 3, like Veil 2 getting completely nerfed, and then Lilith 2 getting completely nerfed, and Runes of War going away, you could have taken those lists at the end of Mark 3, put them back just like how they were, and they wouldn't even be anywhere near the top. Nowhere. Yeah. You could have taken Veil 2, give her back all of her abilities, give her purification, and she still wouldn't have seen play.
Well, all right. So next question from Ben Up is how to win the WTC.
Be Australian. I think we already talked about that.
Yeah, I think that sounds correct. His follow-up question is, what was your favorite bit from this year's WTC?
Favorite bit? What's that mean?
What did you enjoy the most about this WTC?
Oh, every year it's about the community. You get to go and you get to see all the members of the forums you never get to see in person and hang out. And the last day after the event's over, everybody gets absolutely shit-faced drunk. I'm surprised that the bar has enough alcohol to serve everybody there, or if they don't run out, because there are just so many people drinking so much. But the best part about the game, hands down, the reason why I keep on coming back year over year to play and go to conventions is 100% the people in it.
All right, so his follow-up to the follow-up is, are you coming again next year?
I will apply. I will see if I'm on a team. I applied for captain once. It was okay. I don't like organizing a bunch of people, so I'd rather just not apply.
That's fair.
So I'll leave it up to chance. Maybe I'll get on. Maybe I won't. We'll see. If not, I can always, try to go and commentate.
That's true.
I think that they need a pretty good and consistent commentator. I think that should happen for all very large scale events. Like the WTC is like as a world stage for the event, and I think it was great seeing Privateer Press come this year and show a level of interest, because that shows that they care in, I guess, the communities or the game's largest scale event worldwide, right? So hopefully next year it gets hyped up a little bit more. Hopefully next year they get two people who understand the game thoroughly to come through and really dive through each of those games.
Next question from Ben Up. He says, in your opinion, what's the biggest challenge for players with the new edition?
The biggest challenge with players in the new edition is really understanding new unit movement and how placement and how the threat ranges are, and then it's trying to understand how like the removal of free strikes and how disengage works. Those are the big thing, and then how unstoppable. Like you can move if you're engaged, you can move out of combat and make combat actions, but you can't charge out of combat without unstoppable. There's like a lot of like things regarding that get kind of confusing. If you have unstoppable but you're not engaged when you start your charge, you can still charge, and you can charge over models. If you have flight, as long as you have unstoppable before you're engaged, like there's stuff like that.
All right, and so this will probably be this is Benup's last question. This will probably be our last question of this half of the episode. But he says, what do you think is the biggest challenge for Privateer Press?
The biggest challenge for Privateer Press is trying to solidify a competitive game tournament and setup and stay consistent with that setup so that it doesn't fade out after 2 years. If they can do that on a competitive level and get players interested in the game and live stream their game and talk with a level of confidence and actually show that they care about the competitive scene, even though I know the competitive scene isn't the top end of their money. Like I understand that most competitive players also understand that the amount of competitive players in the game makes up a very minimal percentage. We understand that, but it's still nice for them to stream it, to talk about it, to show that level of commitment to the top end players too.
All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and pause there. As always, check out discountgamesinc.com for your gaming needs. You can literally buy happiness on the website with your game purchases. And check out the Patreon to listen to part B of this conversation. And thank you to all the patrons who are supporting the podcast. And thank you, Jake, for sharing your time and sharing your knowledge.
Thanks for having me.
And stay tuned for part 2.